This video lecture is going to talk about nutrients and metabolism. We've looked through the digestive system where we learned how you ingest food and drink, and the function of the digestive system is to break the food down mechanically and chemically to the nutrient level. The nutrient are the little building blocks, amino acids for proteins, simple sugars for carbohydrates, so on and so forth. And so those get absorbed into the bloodstream, travel out to the tissues, and then the tissues use those. This chapter is now going to talk about the usage of those nutrient molecules. Now, we'll be looking specifically at the actual nutrients and the metabolic pathways, the metabolic reactions that allow us to be able to utilize those molecules during this little video lecture. As we take a look at this chapter, as I've mentioned, nutrients provide one of two functions. They either provide energy, we run them through chemical reactions in your cells to break them down, release energy from stored covalent bonds that allows us to generate ATP energy, or they provide building blocks to help us build other molecules within the body. Now, this is not a nutrition class. I'm not going to teach you what are good and bad foods, but I do want to take a moment to talk about the difference between essential nutrients and non-essential nutrients. Essential nutrients cannot be made by your body. Essential nutrients cannot be made by your body. They are essential to a good diet. Non-essential nutrients can be made by your body. An easy example I can show you, or I can describe for you, are proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids, and there's about 20 different amino acids that make up the proteins in the body, in your body. Now, approximately 10 of those are essential, 10 are non-essential. If you are a meat eater, you have no problem in gaining enough protein to be able to break it down into the 20 different amino acids that you have all of the building blocks you need to make any other protein in your body. If out of the blue, you suddenly decide on a whim, I'm going to become a vegetarian and I'm going to eat just iceberg lettuce every day. Well, you're an idiot, because iceberg lettuce is not going to provide you those 10 different essential amino acids. You're going to become, malnourished, which means you're going to be lacking certain amino acids. There are going to be certain proteins you cannot make. Now, non-essential amino acids you can make, but as long as your body is able to bring in enough building blocks, you can modify those to make the non-essentials. You simply don't have the enzymatic ability to make the essential amino acids. They are essential to a good diet. So that I do want you to bear in mind. But like I said, I don't want to get bogged down into good foods, bad foods. Now, I talked about chemical reactions helping to break down molecules. I can take all of metabolic functions and divide into two groups. I can talk about catabolic reactions. They're going to take large molecules and they're going to break them down into small molecules, in the process releasing stored energy, which will allow my mitochondria to take ADP and charge it up into ATP. Conversely, I can use anabolic reactions, which take small molecules, utilizing the energy from stored ATPs to build large complex molecules. And so your cells are doing this all the time. They're breaking stuff down, they're building stuff up. Now, in the process of performing either catabolic reactions or anabolic reactions, it's not a perfect transfer of energy with the ATP. Some of it's going to be released in either direction, either catabolic or anabolic. A little bit of heat gets released. That's actually a good thing because it generates the body heat that maintains our body temperature. And in a future video lecture, we're going to talk about how you maintain your body temperature so that your enzymes work at an appropriate level. Too hot or too cold is going to denature those enzymes, and your cells are not going to be able to function. So that little bit of heat release is actually a good thing. Now, as my cells get catabolized or anabolized, as they break those covalent bonds or build new covalent bonds, the key is actually to the transfer of electrons. And so when I talk about oxidation, oxidation is when I break a chemical bond. And in the process, I'm going to lose electrons. Reduction, conversely, would be gaining electrons. So if I have a molecule, and within that molecule, I've got a carbon that is covalent bond to another carbon, and there's other stuff attached. Within this bond, I've got a pair of electrons that are keeping these two carbon atoms attached. If I will oxidize this molecule, I'm going to break that bond, and that's going to release high energy electrons. Now, as those electrons get released, ideally, I want to be able to capture them and take them to the proper enzyme steps that can allow me to transfer that high energy into converting ADP to ATP. There are some instances in cellular respiration where I've got the enzyme right here ready to capture it. Most, no. And so what we do then is we have molecules called electron carriers. Oops, carriers. These will grab those high energy electrons and then transport them into the mitochondria of your cells, which can then transfer them to enzymes that can convert that energy into ATP. The two electron carriers that you and I will look at, the first one is called NAD, NAD. NAD will grab high energy electrons, and since it's negatively charged, he wants to balance that with a positive charge. He's going to grab a hydrogen ion, and that will convert him into NADH. NADH is now full of high energy that can now travel to the mitochondria. It can release its high energy electrons to the electron transport chain, which then makes ATP. This rips off the hydrogen, rips off the electron, and I regenerate my NAD. NAD will then travel back out to the cytoplasm, where you grab the next electron, and off and off and off you go. Another example is FAD. Now, FAD can actually grab 2 electrons, which means he's going to have to grab 2 hydrogens to balance the charge, and he becomes FADH2. And by the same token, he will travel now to the mitochondria, where he's going to release those high energy electrons to the electron transport chain, which will make ATPs, and that'll regenerate FAD, think of it as an empty bucket that now travels back out to the cytoplasm to fill up with electrons, to travel back to the mitochondria to dump off those high energy electrons, and the empty bucket goes back. I don't like abbreviations, but this is an instance where I'm going to let you get away with telling me NAD or FAD. I don't need you to worry about spelling out nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide or flavine adenine dinucleotide. I'll let you get away with just telling me NAD or FAD. If you can describe this concept, I am a happy camper. So as you read through and talk about either a molecule losing electrons, being oxidized, or a molecule gaining electrons, being reduced, it's all due to these NADs and FADs, which are allow us to make sure those electrons aren't just thrown away. Now, here's a memory device to help you keep track. When you oxidize a molecule, you lose electrons. When you reduce a molecule, you gain electrons. And so as long as you remember oil rig, that'll help you remember that you lose electrons in oxidation, you gain electrons in reduction. Easy memory device, simple to remember. All right, now, as I take a look at the molecules that I'm going to process as nutrients, if I want to use these nutrients for energy, they've got to have they've got to have covalent bonds between carbons within the molecule. And so, for example, we look at a glucose molecule, he's going to have several carbons attached in a sequence. And so each one of these lines represents a covalent bond, storing a lot of energy in those high energy electrons. And so molecules that have a lot of these covalent bonds between carbons, they develop this carbon skeleton. We tend to refer to these as organic molecules. A living organism had to make that. And so an organic molecule will have a carbon skeleton. It'll store a lot of high energy electrons, which allows you to ultimately be able to oxidize it down, releasing a lot of those electrons to be utilized to eventually make a lot of ATPs. When I talk about inorganic molecules. Now I'm talking about molecules that do not have a carbon skeleton. And so things like water, metals, salts, things like sodium chloride don't have a lot of carbon to carbon covalent bonds. They're not good for fuel. Salt, you can't burn salt to make energy. You can't build a fire, put a salt cube on it, and have it just erupt up in flames. Won't happen. And so inorganic molecules can have value for reasons we'll discuss, but they're not going to be fuel purposes. Organic molecules are. With that in mind, the 6 different types of nutrients you and I are going to discuss today are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, minerals, and vitamins. Now, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins are all organic molecules. They help us to generate lots and lots of energy. And so we tend to make most of our diet out of carbs, lipids, and proteins. So we refer to these as macronutrients because you generally need a lot of these to do what you need to do in a 24-hour period. Nucleic acids are also organic molecules, but you consume them in such tiny amounts. The amount of nucleic acid you consume is not going to provide you with fuel, not enough. They do have value, but nucleic acids, minerals, and vitamins are referred to as micronutrients because we tend to require these in small amounts in our diet. Now, I want to take a look at each one of these very quickly, and I want to talk about how you use it in your cells and how you store it in your body. Carbohydrates, when you ingest them, they are mechanically and enzymatically broken down to simple sugars. Glucose. Glucose is the building block or the nutrient form of carbohydrates. This is what's absorbed across the intestinal wall into the bloodstream, which travels out to all the cells. And so glucose is the nutrient form. Now, glycogen is the storage form. And so when you eat a big meal and it has lots of carbs, your digestive system breaks it down to a lot of glucoses, dumps those in the bloodstream, your body realizes very quickly, whoa, blood sugar is too high. Let me store some of that. So you send signals to the liver that takes that excess glucose and combines it through anabolic reactions, reduction, into large chain glycogens. These are stored in the liver until sometime later when your blood sugar levels start to drop. Now I can break down the glycogens, free out a lot of glucoses, and my blood sugar goes back up. You can store approximately 1 day's worth of energy as glycogen. That's pretty much your limit, 1 day's worth. And so let's say, for example, that you went on a cruise. You're on this boat. Storm comes up, tips the boat over, crashes, and in the morning you're in a boat. You're in just a little rubber raft. Big bottles of water, no food, no one around. You're stuck out in the middle of the ocean all by yourself. All right, no food. You gotta just basically wait for someone to come rescue you. You can last about a day on the glycogen. And so you can maintain your cellular needs for energy through the glycogen. After about a day, though, you're going to run out. Now your body's going to need another source of energy. The second source your body tends to look at is going to be lipids, fats. Now, the nutrient form, the building block form of lipids are fatty acids. Fatty acids are long hydrocarbon chains. And so we can take a quick peek here and, no, I don't have the picture yet. Bear with me, I'll get there in a moment. And so we'll have long hydrocarbon chains. And so those fatty acids are what travel through the bloodstream. Your cells use them for a variety of purposes, burn them up for fuel, build them into molecules, and so forth. Now, if you want to store excess fatty acids, the storage form of lipids are triglycerides. This is what is stored in adipose, fat tissue. Now, how much energy can you store? There is no limit. Unlimited, infinite. You can store as much adipose tissue as every potato wedge that you can shove down your gob hole. And so your body will keep laying down adipose tissue everywhere to the point where it's unhealthy, but your body ain't going to stop. There's no ceiling limit. And so you can store an unlimited amount. Now, there's going to be health risks for that, but there is no limit theoretically. So when you're in that boat, for the first day, your body is breaking down carbohydrates. After that, now you're getting into what is considered starvation mode. Now the body's going to say, I still need blood sugar. My brain only eats sugar, so I need blood sugar. So now I need more fuel in a different direction. I'm out of glucoses. I'm out of glycogens. And so that's where you're going to start burning fat. And so as we do that, we're going to start burning fat down, and how long is going to depend on how much you have, how much you exert yourself. But let's say that, eventually I'm getting a little lean, don't have a whole lot of fat on me left. My body needs more fuel. My third possible source for fuel are proteins. Now, proteins are made up, as we said, of amino acids. And amino acids are in the nutrient form. So you digestively break proteins in your stomach and your small intestine down to the amino acid level, the amino acids that are absorbed across the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. There is no storage form of amino acids. You have what is referred to as a plasma pool of amino acids in your blood. And so right now you have a pool of amino acids floating around the plasma of your blood. And so as your cells are making proteins, they're just watching the amino acids float by, and I need one of those. I need one of those. I need one of those. And it'll just simply grab, the cell will just grab whatever amino acids it needs to make whatever protein it needs. But there is no storage form. You don't have an organ that has a big pocket of amino acids in your hip for a rainy day. It's just whatever is floating around in the blood at that time. So the how much do we store? Buckets, 0. So if you're currently lacking in amino acids, say for example lysine, and there's not any in the blood, any protein that needs lysine cannot be made unless you want to start breaking down other proteins in your body. And that will possibly happen. We'll talk about that. And so your body may actually start ripping apart some currently used functional proteins in order to free up certain amino acids to make new ones. That's a little spooky. But that's where we get our fuel. So we've got our carbohydrates, we got our lipids, and we got our proteins. That's our macronutrients. All right. Let's talk about our micronutrients. Let's talk about nucleic acids. Now, you learned back in cell biology classes how nucleic acids are made up of individual building blocks called nucleotides. And we had 4 different nucleotides found in DNA and 4 in RNA. I'm not going to make you worry about memorizing which of those are. You've been there, done that. You know that DNA is your permanent information molecule in the nucleus of your cell. You know that RNA is your temporary information molecule that copies the DNA that goes out to the cytoplasm for ribosomes to make proteins. I'm not going to make you have to spell out deoxyribonucleic acid or ribonucleic acid. I trust you know what it stands for. So here's another instance. I'm going to let you get away with the abbreviations. And honestly, that's all you need to know about nucleic acids in nutrient level. Building blocks of nucleotides, we don't store it, but we do use it as DNA and RNA. All right. Now, minerals. Minerals are inorganic. They don't have a carbon skeleton. Minerals are inorganic. They are required for basic metabolic functions. And we have talked about a variety of minerals throughout AMP1 and so far through AMP2. Almost all these should look familiar. And so you and I talked a lot about calcium and phosphate when we were talking about bone. We were building all that calcium phosphate mineral out in the ground substance of bone. We talked about the function of calcium, helping muscle to work, helping nerve to work. Phosphate is part of ATP. And so tissues that are high in demand of ATP energy, like muscle tissue, like nervous tissue, will need lots of phosphate. Sodium, potassium, we talked about these. They help with the membrane potential of nervous tissue and muscle tissue. And so your body has to maintain good levels of sodium and potassium so that nerve and muscle work well. Chloride is important to help maintain your blood pH. And the way it does that is the chloride pump on red blood cells helps me to move carbon dioxide through the blood. And we're going to find out when we get into the respiratory and urinary systems how CO2 is important for monitoring and regulating blood pH. So indirectly, chloride helps to manage good blood pH by regulating your plasma CO2 levels. Magnesium is a cofactor for the enzyme that breaks up ATP. And so the enzyme that will take an ATP molecule and break it up into ADP plus phosphate plus energy, that enzyme needs magnesium to work. So if you're low in blood magnesium levels, you're not going to be able to easily release this. You're going to be low in energy. You're going to be lethargic, tired, unresponsive. Conversely, if your magnesium levels are too high, that could be bad too, because now it's too easy for that enzyme to work. You're going to be jittery. You're going to be hyperkinetic. You're probably going to have headaches. God forbid, they go high enough, seizures, cramps, all sorts of bad nasties. Iron. We talked about iron in blood. Iron is the molecule within the heme pigment in hemoglobin that helps it to carry oxygen through the bloodstream. And so if you don't have good iron, you're not going to be able to carry good oxygen through the blood. Iodine was in thyroid hormone. Remember the thyroid gland found within our cervical region. The thyroid hormone helps to regulate our metabolic function, helps to stimulate a lot of this ATP breaking down apparatus. And so iodine is important for thyroid hormone to function. The last one is fluoride. Fluoride is actually used in the oral cavity to inhibit bacterial function. And so it helps to reduce bacterial growth. So we fluoridate our toothpaste or our drinking water to help us reduce dental caries, tooth decay. And so fluoride helps us to reduce the bacterial growth within our oral cavity so that we keep nice, good, healthy teeth. That's our minerals. Minerals are inorganic molecules required for metabolic functions. Nutrient number 6 are vitamins. Now, vitamins are organic. They have carbon skeletons. There are too few of them in your food to be able to use as a fuel, but they are required as substrates or as coenzymes. And so if we take a look at the different vitamins, we can break them down to either water-soluble vitamins or lipid-soluble vitamins. Now, when we take a look at these, remember that water-soluble vitamins are going to be able to travel directly into the bloodstream. They're going to be able to quickly travel into the bloodstream from the intestines, but they can also quickly travel out of the bloodstream through the kidneys. So the risk you have is becoming malnourished within water-soluble vitamins. On the other hand, lipid-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, these have to be carried by lipoproteins through the bloodstream. So when you absorb them from the intestines, lipoproteins carry them to the tissues to be utilized. So they last in the bloodstream a lot longer. I'm less worried about malnutrition. I'm more worried about toxicity levels. And so let's say, for example, your little kid gets into the medicine cabinet, grabs a bottle of vitamins and sucks them all down thinking they're candy. You're going to call poison control. First thing they're going to ask you is, which vitamin is it? If it's a water-soluble vitamin, I'm not as worried, because most of that vitamin is going to simply pass right through the intestines, or it's going to pass right through the kidneys. Honestly, the biggest danger of sucking down a whole bottle of water-soluble vitamins is going to be all the fiber in the pills. The kid's going to be constipated. That's it. We're probably not going to have to pump their stomach. But if they suck down a whole bottle of lipid-soluble, yeah, we're probably going to have to bring them into the hospital and pump their stomach, because toxic levels of these can cause big, bad problems. Now, you're going to read through the book about the different functions of these vitamins, and there's lots of functions, but let's focus on the big ones. We take a look at vitamin B1, and I need you to learn the proper spelling of the names. B1 is called thiamine. Look it up, be able to spell it correctly. Thiamine is a coenzyme that regulates carbohydrate synthesis. And so thiamine helps us to be able to build and break down sugars, helps us to maintain good blood sugar levels. B2 is riboflavin. Riboflavin is a component of FAD, that electron carrier. B3 is niacin. Niacin is a component of NAD. And so we need FAD and we need NAD to help us to be able to do all that electron transport work in our cells for good metabolism. So we need vitamin B2, we need vitamin B3. Vitamin B9 is folic acid or folate. Folic acid is important to stimulate DNA synthesis and RNA synthesis. And so if your cells are going through rapid cell division, they're going to be making lots of new DNA, lots of good RNA. You're going to need a lot of vitamin B9. This is why prenatal vitamins are chock full of B9, because your baby is building lots and lots of cells and tissues down here. They're going to need a lot of folic acid to maintain good DNA transcription, good RNA transcription. I'm sorry, DNA replication and good RNA transcription. Vitamin B12 called cyanocobalamin, watch your spelling. This is an important substrate for heme. We talked about how B12 is absorbed from the intestine into the bloodstream, goes to the bone marrow, and within the bone marrow, that B12 is converted into heme. We attach an iron, we attach a globin, we make hemoglobin. Vitamin C is ascorbic acid. Now, this is important for collagen formation. And so for tissues that need a lot of collagen, connective tissues primarily, they're going to need to have a lot of good vitamin C to build these properly. If you're lacking vitamin C, you develop scurvy, and that's where your connective tissues don't form well. They wind up breaking down but not recycling. And so you wind up breaking down connective tissue in blood vessels, in tendons, ligaments, bones, lots and lots of problems there. Over on the lipid soluble side, we've got A, D, E, and K. A is retinol. Retinol is important in vision. The photoreceptors need retinol to be able to convert light into an action potential. D is cholecalciferol or calcitriol. This vitamin allows us to be able to absorb calcium from the intestines into the bloodstream. So D is very important for managing good blood calcium levels. So you can imagine D is very important for good bone development. E is tocopherol. And I'll have you again look up the proper spelling. This is important as an antioxidant. And so as your cells go through cellular metabolism, they make little waste particles, little toxic waste molecules called free oxidants. And these things can burn, they can damage, they can ruin enzymes or organelles or cells. And so vitamin E helps to detoxify these little oxidants. Vitamin K is called phylloquinone. It starts with a PH. Again, watch your spelling. This is a substrate used by the liver to make clotting factors. And so we talked about hemophilia back in blood. And so vitamin K is another vitamin like B12 that was absorbed from the large intestine into the bloodstream. So make sure you know that primary function of each one of these vitamins. All right, that took us through our 6 nutrients, told us the major functions of each, the major components of each. Read through the textbook, make sure you're comfortable with that information. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.